Hi Fox, how are you doing? In the fifth round of the Gashimov Memorial, Carlsen had white pieces today against Timur Radjabov, one of the local players. And well, remember, yesterday he lost his game against Caruana. It was a Berlin defense. So today he had white pieces and had more or less to try to go for a win, I guess, to keep leading the standings. And well, let us see what happened. I will just say the game was interesting, and I will just say that the result was decisive one. Let us see who won this game. Carlsen plays d4 once again, and no surprise, Radjabov goes for his pet line, his pet defense, the King's Indian defense. e4, d6, and okay, Carlsen plays a sideline here. He plays what is called, I think, the Hungarian system. And it is funny because a couple of years ago I used to play this system myself. I had a book on this system for white, and I was trying to learn it because I thought it was a very cool and surprising weapon against the King's Indian defense, very popular defense against 1d4. And I think, well, if I'm not remembering bad, I think its main idea was to keep black surprised and have an early kingside attack with knight g3, bishop e2, and h4, h5. This was more or less the main idea. Then there were lots of ideas with bishop g5, queen d2, as we will see basically in the game. So well, the system in itself isn't nothing really marvelous. If instead it's just a system. So well, if black plays solidly, there's really not much he has to fear, as in fact Radjabov will prove here in the opening. So castles, knight g3, and as I said, the idea is more or less to try bishop e2 and the fast h4, h5, breaking here the black's kingside and attack with the rook, with the bishops, with the knight here. The knight here sometimes has some interesting sacrificing ideas on f5 or on h5. So well, e5 is a very normal reaction in the King's Indian. d5, and well, just to say who some strong GMs having used this system as white are, for instance, Bologan, Richard Rappert, the young strong grandmaster from Hungary, and Ponomaryov or Dreyev from Russia, for instance. Now, against this system, Radjabov reacts in a very classical way. I think the a5 King's Indian is a very classical and solid way of playing the King's Indian. Bishop e2, white would try to h4, play h4, h5, I think. And in fact, after knight a6, h4 is played by Carlsen. And the immediate reaction of black is to play h5, very logical here to stop. You just cannot allow white to play h4 and either exchange that pawn or even advance it even more, because that would create some intense activity of white in the king side. And now the point is that, well, white is controlling g5, which is weak from the black point of view, and more or less the same happens with the g4 square, but with reversed color. And well, each player will try to take advantage of that strong square he has. Now white plays bishop g5, very typical, just pinning the knight, taking advantage that there is no h6 chasing the bishop away. But black simply gets out of the way, queen e8, gets out of the pin, the bishop keeps defending the knight, so queen d2 is played. It is allowing white to choose which side he's going to castle. Sometimes you try to castle long. I just remember some games from that book I was reading, in which white just castles long and immediately starts a quick attack with some sacrifices on h5 or on f5, whatever, sometimes succeeding. And well, you also have the idea of exchanging the bishop on g7 with bishop a6. Now black plays knight c5, and I guess this is a very nice point of the a5 King's Indian defense system, to play this a5 pawn, a5 move, as before now would be uncomfortable for black. So now it is not possible chasing out this strong knight centralized here, looking really good. An alternative probably was to play knight a7, chasing away that bishop right away. And well, white could, for instance, try to play bishop h6, and after this exchange, this may look a little bit scary because the queen has got into the black king's fortress here. But well, if black plays precisely, there is really nothing that great to fear. For instance, the computer suggests to play queen e7, and well, f5 is a move that sometimes could be played whenever g6 is protected, etc. And well, but black certainly cannot be careless. For instance, bishop d7 just seems a normal move, but here white has some tricks. Obviously, having this queen so near black's king must do something. So bishop takes h5, as I was mentioning. There are in this line there are some tricks, some tactics, sacrificing on h5 on f5. So in this case, black just cannot afford to take on h5 because the checkmate on g7 after knight takes h5. There is no way to stop it. Absolutely. So well, after queen takes h6, exchanging the bishops, queen e7 is much better because now white cannot take on h5 because after g takes h5, knight takes h5, f5 is possible, and the queen is guarding g7. So well, not so easy. I mean, sharp games, sharp positions could arise, but generally I think black is doing pretty well here in these positions. He's more or less looking solid. So after knight c5, Carlsen just goes ahead and Carlsen's long, and well, there are still some games in the online database of the chess base. But with this position, but only between amateur players, so probably both players were out of book already in this position. Here black plays the knight g4 move, threatening to take on f2 and fork both rooks, more or less forcing white to take on g4. He takes with the bishop, forcing the f3 move, and he just goes back to d7. And in this way he obtains the bishop pair, and well, which helps him, of course. Having the bishop pair is an advantage, you know. Still the position is closed, but in a future position this could be very helpful. And it also stops white's attacking possibilities, as the light squared bishop is key in this position. If white wants to attack, to play sometimes g4 or a sacrifice or do whatever. And now in this position, white's possibilities are more or less harmless already on the king side. So Carlsen starts to regroup his pieces, seeing that he hasn't that many chances to attack on the king side anymore. Now he goes back with the bishop to e3. b6 was played here, cementing that c5 knight. King b1, prophylactic moves. If white takes, for instance, on c5, b takes, and now suddenly the b file could be giving black lots of attacking possibilities with the rook. The bishop or even the queen could join the attack, and this could be fun to play as black. So king b1, just prophylactic. Black plays here the interesting king h7, I guess, to stop an eventual bishop h6, trying to exchange the bishops. And well, an interesting move, this one. This is the only idea really I get behind this move. Maybe to make f5 more comfortable to play for black, but still interesting idea. So Carlsen plays queen c2, maybe to try to use this light square diagonal some days, as well. Really, there isn't that much else to do in the position. You're not threatening anything, black isn't threatening anything immediate, so this could be a useful move for the future. Black plays a4. This pawn could be interesting to try and, well, just use it as a weapon against white king. And once again, Carlsen keeps relocating his pieces. The knight goes back towards the center. Knight ge2. First it was the queen, now the knight. You have to keep your pieces in useful squares. And well, black now goes ahead with f5. A very typical move in the King's Indian defense, attacking white central pawn chain, and certainly black can perfectly afford this move. a3 was as well looking natural, trying to open up white's king side, and of course white would play b3, not giving black that pleasure, and probably this could transpose into something similar to what happened in the game f5. Once again, could be possible. And well, white could take on f5. It seems scary because bishop takes f5 is attacking both queen and the king on the same diagonal, but white still has knight e4 to save him from that. And well, this may be a little bit scary, but actually may not be that bad for white. More or less balanced position. Of course, black is very comfortable here, so he has no problem. He has nothing to complain about the opening, of course. f5 was played anyway. Magnus took on f5, which makes things a little complicated. After g takes f5, lots of action is going on this area of the board on the center slash king's 8. And well, definitely Magnus plays really creative here. His idea is to play rook h3 to attack the g file with this rook. I mean, it could be played, for instance, f4, trying to stop some f4 ideas by black. But after e4, well, g4, g2 pawn for white may be a little bit weak, so black could play, I mean, maybe queen g6, put the rook on the g file. So well, it is clear black will be the one trying to get the advantage in this concrete position, I think. But okay, rook h3 certainly is being creative. Radjabov goes back with the king to h8. There is nothing, no more bishop h6 to guard anymore. So I guess he just goes away from this light square diagonal in which the white queen is. And now Carlsen goes ahead with f4. Now instead of going e4, which I guess was once again possible, knight e4 is the move which Radjabov plays. Carlsen takes and f takes. Now a little mess has been created here on the f file, and well, for instance, the most obvious blunder here would be terrific move queen takes e4. White just cannot take that pawn because bishop f5 and the game is over. The queen is pinned. So well, Carlsen here plays his idea. He plays rook g3 to control the g file with his rook. Now the bishop goes to g4, and now it's, I guess, more or less threatening to take on f4, create lots of problems here. So this was Carlsen's idea. It seems the world champion was planning to sacrifice the exchange here. H takes, and well, he does that in exchange of the control of some light squares and for some open lines against the black king, which may be vulnerable now. I mean, the h pawn could be so important and the light squares, etc. So well, certainly an interesting idea. I mean, objectively speaking, the engine doesn't believe it's so great, but practically speaking, it has some interesting ideas. So even if difficult positions, you can see the world champion creating some interesting ideas. Here he plays if f5, giving up that pawn on f5, so that after rook f5 he wins the tempo with knight g3, and after rook f8 he takes on e4. Well, I think in the press conference Carlsen mentioned that if knight takes and queen g6, he says he thought more or less he was more or less losing here, because whenever in his opinion, whenever black puts the queen on g6 on this great diagonal, white has no more attack anything else on the light squares, and he's basically screwed up. So he takes with the queen, maybe threatening to take g4, and well, controlling certainly some light squares, and maybe having something to say against black king. So Radjabov keeps calm. He plays queen d7, a3, just maybe probably to stop any possible a3 by black, and b5. Black feels the necessity to open up lines against the white king and try to use these open lines to get some attack going on. He just doesn't want to sit there and see if white can prove his compensation for the material. And here, of course, if white takes, queen takes would happen, and the b file could be a very painful open file for white. So Carlsen plays c5 instead. Here after d takes c5, he doesn't take. Right now he goes ahead with h5 advancing this pawn, trying to create something against black king. c4 is played, saving that pawn. h6 and bishop f6. Well, Carlsen goes bishop c5, trying to now relocate that bishop, attacks the rook on f8, rook f7, and now he goes rook f1. And after rook e8, certainly, a tough position for white, because his material disadvantage hasn't proved anything real yet. Black has more or less regrouped his piece in what could be a defensive task. He has the pawn, he has the exchange, and whenever he exchanges a couple of pieces and makes his king's life much safer, white will have to basically resign. So, well, Carlsen plays bishop b4, probably willing to put this on c3 and try to control the big diagonal here. Now bishop g5 attacks pawns, knight f5 defends it, and c6, challenging the last central pawn of white. And here, well, Carlsen chose to play bishop d6, creating even more material imbalance, probably with some good reason. But okay, the other alternative was maybe to take on g4. Here, bishop f4, because the bishop was under attack there. White could take on c6, but queen d3 check, king a2, rook g8 could be played, and well, black controls lots of squares. Now even white king may be in danger, so this cannot be good for white. Bishop d6 was another chance to force a tactical sequence we're just gonna see. It is more or less attacking the pawn on e5, although it would be very dangerous to take, because the rook would be x-raying the queen. But even bishop goes to f4, and now knight g7 is played, attacking the rook on e8, but leaving the bishop here unprotected. So the queen takes on d6, Carlsen takes on the rook on e8, and Radjabov takes on d5. And after this more or less forced sequence, well, white has g3, king goes to h7, and well, g takes, e takes, the knight goes to d6. After this more or less forced tactical sequence, black ends up with 3 pawns for a piece for the white knight. But the fact that, for instance, the white king is very far away from the center, and black has a couple of strong passed pawns, connected passed pawns on the g and f file, are giving black quite an edge. So this is more or less already losing for white, at least it's supposed to be so. I bet I would lose this both as black and white tons of times. Rook f6 is played here, attacking both the knight and the pawn. Knight takes b5 and king, f3. It is after knight d4 that the king takes on h6. Well, Carlsen goes towards the center with the king c2, king g5, king d2, f2. It is important not to lose control of the central pawns, because whenever white can even sacrifice his knight for both these pawns, he will have very practical chances to draw this. So f2 is played first. After knight e2, rook goes to f3, king c2. It was very important here not to fall into the temptation just to push the pawn with g3, because after knight takes g3, rook takes, white is very relieved here. Extremely relieved. Not that he's drawing this immediately, because this is not that easy to draw, and probably black has lots of winning chances, but this is much easier than the endgame that we are seeing in the game actually. So it was important after king c2 to move the king forwards, and now you are threatening to go to g3, so that if white sacrifices, you can take with the king and not let white take on f2. Say, if white plays just a move, I don't know, and plays king b1, you can freely push this pawn, because after knight takes, king could take, and white just cannot take on f2 because the rook hasn't taken on g3. That was the point, I guess. going nearer with the king. Now Carlsen checks on h1, rook h3, of course exchanging rooks here is as valid as to resign, so Carlsen goes back, but still now g3 can be played, and after king d2, king g4, the king will go to f3, will help the pawn go to g2, so the game is basically over. There is nothing much white can do to survive there, and after this 51st move of Timur Radjabov, Carlsen just resigns. And there it goes. I mean, after the phenomenal start of the tournament of Magnus Carlsen, he won the first 2 games in a row in a very nice style. Everybody was saying he was going just to run over with the tournament and maybe reach 2900 rating after this tournament. They were calculating how much did he need to, how well did he need to perform to reach that 2900 rating. But right now he's lost 2 games in a row, which is something it didn't happen, I think, for years. I was reading just a couple of minutes ago. It was in Bilbao, maybe in 2010. He started with 2 defeats against Kramnik and Anand, but it was very, very long time ago, and certainly very unexpected to see Carlsen losing 2 games in a row, and especially today with white pieces. But there it goes. He's losing already almost 7 points on the ELO ratings. Today, I think it's a rest day, so let us see if he can recover and come back in the second part of the tournament.